It's my pleasure to welcome as our moderator an Atlanta legend. We are lucky to have her today as well, and she will do the job of formally introducing our panel. But I'd like to welcome to stage Miss Alexis Scott. I told her I wasn't going to mess it up, and then I did, so I apologize.
All right, I'm going to ask the rest of the panel to come on out. We have with us Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. She is the former president, or president emerita of Spelman College. And then we have Judge Penny Brown Reynolds, who is a multi-talented person. And then we have the managing director of True Colors Theater Company, Sandra Stevens. How about it? Welcome, ladies, and welcome everybody. This is a lovely turnout. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm so delighted to have this group. We want to just talk about women leading the way, and I thought the thing that we would do is to let each of our panel members talk about their journey a little bit, just briefly. Hey, Winnie. And talk about their challenges, biggest challenge, and their biggest success in that 5-minute story of their journey so far. So we'll start with that. We'll just go down the road.
Great. Well, once again, I'm Beverly Daniel Tatum, and I'm happy to be here as well. And I guess I would start my story in Tallahassee, Florida. I was born in Tallahassee in 1954, and I think that's significant because it was the year of Brown versus Board of Education. And as somebody who has spent most of my career talking and writing about race as a psychologist, I find some symbolism in that, having been born at the turn of that important Supreme Court decision. But I didn't grow up in Florida. My family, my parents were both educators. My father was an art professor and taught at Florida A&M, and my mother eventually became a reading teacher. And in 1958, looking back on it, I see that they were part of the Great Migration, but they moved north from the South to Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts, in a small town, Bridgewater, Massachusetts. My father became the first African-American professor at Bridgewater State College, which is now Bridgewater State University. So I grew up in this kind of interesting, somewhat privileged situation because my father was the first black professor at Bridgewater State. Everybody in this small town knew him. And my mother became a teacher and served on the school board before that, and everybody in the town knew her. But I was often the only black kid in my class. It was a very small black population, and that was a challenge, growing up in that socially isolated way. But at the same time, it was also an advantage because I had access to excellent schools. I went on to college, got my PhD in psychology, and not surprisingly, my first book was about the experiences of black families in predominantly white communities, a book called Assimilation Blues. But my career as a psychologist went forward in a pretty ordinary way, though often I was the only black female professor at the places where I taught. And I spent many years teaching at Mount Holyoke College. But then I moved on into college administration while at Mount Holyoke, becoming dean of the college and then having the opportunity to serve as acting president at Mount Holyoke. And then in 2002, certainly I count it my greatest success, I was recruited to come to Spelman College and serve as president here in Atlanta for 13 years, which was a wonderful experience, and very grateful for having had that experience. And then retiring from Spelman, now back in some ways to where I started, writing and talking about race. And that's what I've been doing in the last 3 years.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good afternoon. I am the panelist with the one who has many, many lives. And it really started, I'll go back to childhood, but I'll just let you know why I feel like I could have so many lives, because growing up in the segregated South, my mother was asked in the grocery store once by a white woman, "Oh, you have such a beautiful little girl." And she leaned over and said, "Little girl, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And my mother said, "Madam, my daughter does not have to choose one thing. You can ask her what are some of the things she's going to do when she grows up." And it was that kind of consciousness that was put inside of me that let me know that everything I could dream, I could do it. So now let me back up with the story. I'm a New Orleans girl, but was actually born in Houston. Because in 1961, my mother went to Houston to have a child as a single woman and to give that child up for adoption because she had been violated. So she was watching a soap opera called As the World Turns. Do we have anybody who knows anything about As the World Turns? Y'all know Nancy Hughes? Nancy Hughes had a daughter named Penny Hughes. And on February 23rd, 1961, Penny Hughes lost her baby. Her that you're giving away your child, and yet was assigned to keep the child. So how do you keep the child that wasn't supposed to be here anyway, in a place when there are only 5 states in the United States where interracial marriage is legal? And the couple that came from me is a white doctor and a black professor. And so she kept me. She went back home to New Orleans, a mostly Catholic town, and the family held on to the secret. I'll tell you how long that took. So I go on, knowing that something's not right, and in an all-white community, and something very different about me. My mother raised me, and education was everything. And I go on to go to school. I come here in Georgia. But before that, I grew up in a city, the little area where we were, that everything was music. And so I was surrounded by Wynton Marsalis, the Marsalis family. It wasn't Wynton at the time. The Neville brothers, all of that's in that area. And this little girl, who's pretty much like I am now, was singing on Bourbon Street at a little age, singing jazz. So I was a musician, and I love jazz singing. I have members from my church, and unfortunately there'll be times in the pulpit I'll get up and I'll just start singing something in jazz because it's in me. So I thought I was going to be in music, only to decide that being a child of a single parent, you're ridiculed and you're bullied. So I decided I'm going to become something that no one would ever question my integrity, and that was to be a judge. So I started out and came to Atlanta, went to law school, and I had it all planned out. I only went to law school to be a judge. So from the very moment I went, it was so that I could be in a profession where I felt I could find the self-worth and the respect that now I know was taken from my birthright, but I had been teased so badly and talked about so badly. I spent my whole life trying to prove myself. So I go on to law school, and then after law school, I'm in the Attorney General's office. I'm a former prosecutor. I go on to be the first African-American chief of staff for a lieutenant governor, running the Senate, general counsel for the lieutenant governor, then first African-American to serve as a lawyer for the governor. And then I'm appointed to the trial court bench. That's going really well for about a decade. And then while I'm there on the bench, someone gets an idea that I should go and be on Dr. Phil as an expert. And it was a guy, I think, that played tennis with them, and a lady by the name of Phaedra Parks, who was my mentee at the time. She said, I think you ought to go and be on it. So I went on Dr. Phil. It was during ratings period. It was the most highly rated Dr. Phil they had. And then Hollywood came calling. And so how do I make the decision to leave Hollywood? But I am the oldest of 3 girls. My mother died young, and I am sister mother. And so although being a judge is all I ever wanted to be, I went on television in order to be able to care for my family. Does that make sense? Because I knew that as long as I was a lawyer, I was going to be fine. And so I went on, but I would only go on if I could be like Oprah and Barbara Walters. And we were the only 2 that actually owned our own show, which was very difficult to do, to own your show when everything is about big studios. I didn't know that at the time. So it would have been easier if I had gone with Fox or someone else. But I wanted ownership and creation. So I'm executive producer, I'm all of that. Had to raise the money and all of that. So I do that, end up with an Emmy nomination. But in the meantime, I get a call to ministry. So I have to go to seminary while I'm on the bench. And I saw that was a way of God telling me, use the television show to do ministry and you can still be judged. But little did I know I was doing cases. But I debuted at the time when the Housewives debuted, and how Hollywood viewed African Americans, females, was something other than what I was prepared to be. You understand? I'm a woman of God, and so they wanted me to ratchet that thing up a little bit. And because I owned it, I was not going to do that. And so I made the choice to make ministry full time. So that was good, but that wasn't enough. I've gone on to write 4 books, a novel and self-help books. I've gone on to go to Harvard in the meantime, and in organizational leadership. Finished that. I'm working on a PhD now. And so you see why I said all these lies? But most importantly, I'm a grandmother. That's me.
My name is Chandra Stevens Albright, and I'm a native Atlantan, and as such, I have a problem with the housewives too, because you're from Atlanta. You were even in the city. So I was born 1 week after the church was bombed in Birmingham. My birthday is September 21st, 1963, and I remember my mother telling me, she told me that she thought, what kind of world am I bringing my baby into when they are killing little girls in church? And I didn't have any concept of what she was talking about really until this show. So how did I get here? We talked about the high points in our lives and the low points of our lives. This is a high point in my life. Being in this place at this time, running this theater, is the absolute high point of my life. I was born here. My mom teaches at Morehouse still. She's been there for 55 years. She's still teaching. And my dad passed away, but he's a major fundraiser. So he was the first African-American executive CEO of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And he basically created the concept of diversity and philanthropy. I found all this out. I had been working at Coke. I worked at Coke for 22 years. Let me go back a little bit. Sorry. So I grew up with academic parents. And so they just said, follow your heart, study what you want to study, do what you love, and it'll follow. So I had this amazing chemistry teacher in high school, went to Woodward Academy, and I loved chemistry. So I decided to go to Emory University, and I majored in chemistry. And then I decided, what am I going to do with this? I'm not really interested in sitting on a bench and mixing things up. I'm interested in how chemistry enables a consumer experience. So I got an MBA at Washington University in St. Louis. So I took my MBA and my chemistry background, took it to Coca-Cola, where I worked on bringing the brand to life in customer outlets. So I did that for 10 years, and then for the next 12 years, I worked on innovation. So innovation meaning what products are we not selling at Coke that can be a part of a general beverage portfolio? And the biggest thing I did was working on Coca-Cola Freestyle. So y'all have seen the machine that has all the buttons? I'm its mother. My baby! 5-year gestation period. Anyway, it was a concept, and so they brought in a guy to run the business side of it, and they brought me in to figure out what could this be from a consumer perspective. What kind of flavor should it have? What should it be called? How would we market it? How would it look? So I did all that consumer research and worked on that thing from the time it was just a concept on paper to the time it launched. And that was a high point, but not the high point, because I got to work with product developers and software engineers and industrial designers and supply chain people to figure out how to make it from an idea to actually scaling up and producing it. Love that stuff. So that was all going on at Coke. 2011, my father, who is my boy, was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic, inoperable, incurable pancreatic cancer. It was 2 weeks before his 73rd birthday. And we're like, okay, well, he's going to be 75, and we're going to take him into palliative care. What the doctors didn't know that my father could teach master classes in stubborn to a mule. He is the most stubborn man, and I get it from him. It's like there's nothing that I'm not, if I'm going to do something, it's going to happen. And so he's like, I am not going to die now. I am not ready to die now. So I'm 73, but I'm going to try this experimental chemotherapy, and we're going to kick this cancer's butt for a minute, and I'm going to keep going. And he did. He lived for 2 years. Cancer, those tumors shrunk, and he lived for 2 good years. And that's when I found out what a rock star he was in philanthropy and fundraising, because he never really talked about it. He just did his thing, and he was a bad, but he just did his thing. And so the low point is he finally lost his battle in February 2013. He lost his battle on Thursday, February 14, 2013. My job was eliminated at Coke after 22 years on Monday, February 10th, 2013. So in 1 week, I lost my job and I lost my daddy. And I had to just take a minute and figure out, like, what am I going to do now? I had an opportunity to go for another job, and like, I cannot do that right now. So I went inside my heart. I took 6 months and talked to all my friends. A lot of my friends had gone from corporate to nonprofit. And I decided, well, Daddy could raise money. Maybe I could raise money for somebody, or maybe I could just run a nonprofit. And all the people that knew me well said, you need to run a nonprofit because you're not really good at people telling you what to do. If my husband were here, he would totally second that. And so I decided that I was going to run the Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta. I had no nonprofit experience. That's the largest nonprofit in the state that serves youth. And I'm gonna apply for that job. And the guy got my resume. He's like, what? I'm intrigued by your chutzpah. But he put me on the slate to be on the interview for the job. And so I went to the Georgia Center for Nonprofit and said, listen, I want to take your nonprofit leadership class. And they're like, well, you have to be a nonprofit CEO to take this class. I'm like, well, I'm going to be a nonprofit CEO, so I need to take this class because I don't have any peer network. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, the woman who went in the class was on the search committee for the nonprofit, my first nonprofit job. So basically, this woman just walked in this class and doesn't have a job, and we need a person to run the station. So I interviewed and I got the job, and it was awesome. 3.5 years there. It was a youth development program that had a camping component, and I did finally run into the thing that outdid me, which was the camping part. There was a camp component that was 56 days of camp. Camp was 100 miles away each way. June and July, camp, people falling out of trees, people getting bit, people having allergic reactions. And to me, camp is open the door, there's a parking lot. That is camp. For them, it was rubber, foam rubber sheets and bugs and outdoor toilets, and I did it for as long as I could. So I said, I'm gonna leave y'all. It's been great, but I'm gonna leave y'all July 31st, 2017 is gonna be my last day. Thank you. And a friend of mine knew Kenny, and so she was having dinner with Kenny. Kenny's like, I'm a managing director. I hired someone. My managing director's leaving, got another job. Hired someone. And they said no at the last minute, and I need a managing director. I'm like, well, good luck with that. I wish you the best. And so my husband said, give her your resume, because I don't know if I can take another 6 months of you not working at home. So I gave him my resume, and I gave him my resume on a Monday. We had lunch on Tuesday. Me and Kenny had lunch on Tuesday. Me and Jen, my predecessor, who's amazing, had lunch on Wednesday. And then she had come out of office and talked to some people about this. So I met some board members on Wednesday night, and I thought, it was nice, thank you. It was very nice meeting you. And Thursday they called with the job offer. So I left the last job on a Friday and started this job on next Monday, and I am not sorry. Sometimes things happen because they're supposed to happen. I have never worked in a theater before as a job, but all that experience from Coke and you talked about lives. I haven't had a lot of lives, but I've been touching a lot of experiences, and every single thing I learned in both of those places, I'm putting to use in this job, and I feel absolutely integrated and whole being here.
This is really exciting. I wanted to hear more and more and more, but we'll just go on to the next thing. I thought since we were doing this behind the four women song, I would ask the panelists to say if they, one, saw themselves in any of the four women, or two, to talk about colorism as an issue, since that was a specific thing they did in this song. So we'll start with you. Help me say your name.
Chandra.
Chandra.
It took Kenny a year to get my name right, so don't feel bad. He calls me Chandra Albright Stevens. He just calls me CSA now. That easier. So this is a complicated question for me. My Peaches is who I identify with. And if you call me light skinned, I will try to fight you. I mean, I'm much mellower now because I love my job. But back when I was at Coke, I was totally Peaches because I had to be like defensive and, you know. And so myself, like if I look at myself and I had to describe myself in terms of my color in a mirror, it would be nowhere near paper bag. I am brown, brown, brown. But I've been disabused of that by people that are like, no, you're not. But that's how I see myself. I see myself as proud and brown, and don't mess with me. I see myself probably 6'4". Grady Jarrett kind of comes to mind when I picture myself in terms of how I am on the inside. So yeah, I actually had issues with when I lived in New Orleans. There was a lot of color stuff going on, and I didn't have the hair. That's why I cut it off because it just didn't do anything in that humidity. And so there was a lot of that sort of kind of, you are here because you're this color and you're here. It just really ate at me. And I was in high school, 9th and 10th grade. So I have a weird sort of, what you see is not what I see in terms of color.
Well, I can't pick just one. And even with Nina Simone, period. But Sophronia, you would think, because her circumstance was like mine, being born, but it's Peaches. So it's a combination of. And if you remember, Peaches says she's tough. And I'm a tough woman. And I am very tough. I know how to sweeten it up a little bit, but I'm tough. And when I graduated from ITC, I often say I went to find God in seminary, but I found myself. And I found my blackness there, because it is a place of liberation theology and James Cone, and you're studying where the revolution is as it relates to God. And New Orleans is completely about skin color. And grandmother was about if the boy who came to take you out was darker than a brown paper bag, that kind of skin color difference. So you have to understand when Sophronia and the song says, I kind of maneuvered my way through two worlds. I was able to do that, but something was still stirring inside of me. And so I'm a preacher, and I'm a black preacher. And so you know that it was there all along. But I found it when I went to seminary, and we learned about the history, and we had to study West Africa and how we got here, and the seasoning and everything that happened to our people that resonated with me. And the whole idea of justice, which is why I went into law for social justice. But then the whole concept of Nina Simone, I am like one of her biggest fans in the whole wide world. And I know we have to get to something else. Maybe I'll talk about Nina on the way back. Because what I want to do is I want them to know her like I know her. And I can do it like this, so you all can really know this sister. And then you'll kind of get me too.
So when I hear the song, I identify in some ways and in some ways not. Because all of the four women have really struggled in ways that I would say don't really speak to my experience. But having grown up in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, which is a small New England town, I can identify with Sophronia, not because I'm biracial, but being the only black kid in the class, you know, sort of navigating a largely white environment and then leaving that community and figuring out how I want to identify my own black identity. You know, and when you hear her character in that song, you hear a woman who has identity issues, right? And so in that sense, really trying to figure out, okay, growing up in a largely all-white environment, that's not who I am, but yet I understand that environment. And then being able to move, when I went away to college, I wrote this book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together? Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria and Other Conversations About Race? I was certainly one of those black kids in that cafeteria, sitting at that table, really identifying with that experience. So in that sense, I can see that identity challenge. But when I hear the song, I was thinking, I listened to it again, not just this afternoon when we heard the performers sing it so well, but listening to it at home in anticipation of coming here, I was thinking about Nina Simone, who was born in 1933, died in 2003, and wondered what her song would sound like if she was writing it today. Because when I listened to the first line of the song, I'm black and my arms are long, I thought of Michelle Obama, who's got those beautiful arms. And I was thinking about all the women who physically might represent the song, but whose experiences in the 21st century are very different.
All right. I don't know if we're ready to transition. Do you want to go back to the Nina Simone?
Yes. I kind of wanted to know, how many of you know about Nina Simone? Okay, well, everybody kind of knows about her.
But you know something that is...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nina Simone is the antiphony of what black women have gone through. So let me give you a little snapshot, if you already know, but just, can I give a little summary?
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of get it all. Child prodigy on that piano. Mother who's a preacher. Now back then the mother is the preacher. And she's playing in the church. And she's spirited, because the Holy Spirit would come upon her. And so in this time of segregation, these white ladies who could teach piano saw something in her and introduced her to classical music. So she's about to have these recitals, and they made certain that the parents would be at the back of the room. But here's this little girl thinking, wait a minute, I want them up front. So she had that spirit. I'm showing you how it evolved over time. She goes to Juilliard, which is a dream because she is quite the classical pianist. And her dream was to play Carnegie Hall and be the first African-American woman to do that in classical music. Then she wants to get into, I think it's the Curtis in Philadelphia, place of music. And she auditions, it goes quite well, and she doesn't get in. You ever been rejected to the point where it stops you? 6 months or so she goes underground. Then she finally realizes that she was rejected and not got in because of her skin. She has to raise money. Family comes. Now let's see the dynamics of the one in the family that makes it. Sort of like the one in the family that takes care of the mama and everybody else doesn't do anything and they expect you to, y'all know what I'm talking about? This is a church-going crowd, so I know y'all know what I mean. There's always that one. She was the one that was supposed to make it. So she's in Philadelphia, so she's playing in Atlantic City in a nightclub. So I'm feeling, I know everything, this whole thing. She's making pennies, but she gets ready to play. But you gotta play everything. And remember now, Nina Simone combined music like no one else did. Folk music, jazz, R&B, classical. She played between the notes. So she's playing, but that wasn't her name. She changed her name to Nina Simone, because why? She didn't want her mama to know she was playing the devil's music. I remember that. When I wanted to sing and do all of that, at 15, I became baptized in the Baptist church. And I was singing in what they called the juke joint, or the club with the sawdust floors. I wasn't doing it for that, I was doing it because I loved music so much. Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday and Nina Simone, obviously. But either way, she goes on, she marries a man. New York cop. Light skin, looking good, cutie pie. Nina has incredibly beautiful African features. broad nose, full lips, hair, everything beautiful about her. She gets it, he's going to be her manager, she's taking off, but one thing happened that I think broke her soul. Not only did he beat her one night, over many nights, it was cruel yet, but he took her and tied her down and raped her. And it broke her. So imagine her doing all of this, not on drugs now, but singing through the pain. So you could hear in the songs, if you go back and listen to it, you hear the pain because the music was the only thing that got her through. And so then comes, I'm fast forwarding now, they have a whole lot of other stuff that happened, but the civil rights movement comes. And if you hear this song called Mississippi Goddamn, this sister then becomes an activist through her music, but then she's radicalized. Not like Belafonte and the others, Aretha Franklin, who still managed to be a part of the movement without being radicalized. So that means Carmichael, Black Panthers, she identified more with them. By any means necessary, pick up means to fight. And that's what she identified with. But the very thing that she identified with was the thing that ostracized her from what she was doing. And so business was drying up. She has a daughter. The man has beat her, and he keeps doing it. And now she's so radicalized. Now, when I say radicalized, it broke her heart because she finally understood the meaning of why, when she was 19, her destiny was taken from her. So she's singing these songs that were so blunt and raw that she ends up leaving to go live in Liberia after Dr. King is killed, Langston Hughes. I mean, this was a period when everything about theater, politics, they were all together. She goes to, and everybody knows why she went there, because freed slaves had gone there, and she found herself. But at the same time, she had to have money. She goes back to Switzerland or Europe, but then she has issues, and they're mental issues, because she's mentally ill. And the thing that her husband did to her, she did to her own daughter, who was left with Malcolm X's family after he had died to raise her. Then she comes and she begins to beat her because that pain that he beat her was in her. She still continued to sing. She goes on to Europe and takes a dip of despair. I mean, to the point of almost playing in clubs and people are not thinking it is. Now, this is the Nina Simone. Grammy nominations, all these places, to the point where she almost was homeless. And the brothers and this white gentleman who was like her brother, he was her guitarist, who played with her, they went and found her and got her back. And she was diagnosed with manic, bipolar, and depression. And it breaks your heart to think that she sang through it. They medicated her, and that, you know, that medication did a number on her, but she still could sing through it. She was a genius in the midst of everything, and she was that one who, that's where I identify with her, in that she was uniquely herself, but the world wouldn't let her be herself because she was before her time. And so I believe she reconciled with her daughter, who ended up going back and living with her father. But then she died at 70. But she did not die without being lifted back up again and doing some of her most brilliant work. She is really, when you think about it from the movement standpoint, when you think about what it meant for a woman who has been through domestic violence, when you think about women who go through depression and mental illness, this woman did it all. And yet still that thing from God, when the word says he'll make room for your gift. In the midst of everything she went through, God made room for her gift. And so I'm connected to her, but I just wanted you all to know. Now, if you didn't know, you really know now, right? That's Miss Nina Simone.
I think if you all are ready, we'll open up to the audience for some questions. If you'd like to talk, ask questions for the panel. Oh, we have written questions for the panel. Okay. Do we want to bring them up or just read the question? Oh, okay. 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 This first question is for Judge Penny Brown. What are the titles of your books, and what is your writing process?
Well, that's a good question. Who asked that? Good. I have Women in the Law, A Guide to Women's Legal Rights in Georgia. I compilated with another person and edited and took all the laws that were for women. 7 Steps to Peace of Mind, Real Talk for Real Sisters. And then my latest book is really about skin color, among other things. It's a novel called My Mother Told Me. And it's set in New Orleans. And the protagonist, the character, is a lawyer who's dark-skinned in a family that's light-skinned. And all of the dynamics that happen because of that. What's my writing process? I'm a very disciplined person, so I'm writing the sequel to that now. I'm a person, I love to read, but I can't read one book at a time. Are you all like that? So if I'm in the bed, I might have 5 books in the bed, and I might pick up one and read that one, that couple of chapters from that. And so I'm very disciplined. I'm an early morning person, so besides working out, I write. First thing in the morning. It's to me when God speaks to me and when I have most of my creativity. We're still going strong. It's 1 o'clock. But after 4 o'clock, things start going down for me. And I'm married to a night person. Go figure. And so that's my process, and those are my books. But My Mother Told Me, which I want to have made into a play, is dealing with the dynamics of that whole New Orleans culture and the issues of skin color.
All right, thank you. This is for Dr. Beverly. Did you participate in psychological research studies?
Yes. So I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I went to Wesleyan University as an undergrad, but then went to the University of Michigan to earn my master's degree and then my PhD. And of course, to get your doctorate, you have to do a research project. So my first major research project was my dissertation, which was based on interviews with Black families raising their children in predominantly white communities. And I was interested in understanding how parents in that situation, what they do in order to reinforce a positive sense of racial identity for their kids, even though they're living outside the context of a larger Black community. And that research project turned into my first book, which is called Assimilation Blues, Black Families in a White Community. So without getting into too much detail about that, I came to understand that families had different strategies. Some families were what I called race conscious, some families were race neutral, some families were race avoidant. And I was wondering what difference it made in terms of the strategies that parents used. So fast forward, I did another research project interviewing young Black college students about who were at the height of their identity development as college students, and I was interested in understanding the relationship between what their parents did at home and how they were navigating their own identity development. And so I interviewed college students, not only at predominantly white institutions, but also at a historically black college, not Spelman, but Howard University. I interviewed, and I was interested in understanding the impact that the parental socialization strategies had on their coping skills. So that was, that was interesting. I wrote about that. And then, of course, I was teaching a course, for many years I taught a course on the psychology of racism. And it was really what I learned in my teaching that course and my students' response to understanding racism, how it operates in our society. Not just their cognitive response, but one of the things I came to understand is that people have very deep emotional responses to that content. And it was really that work that led me to write the book that most people know, which is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, and Other Conversations About Race, which is a book I wrote 20 years ago, but recently updated and revised, and it came out last fall.
What did you find different in the 20-year span?
Well, there are some things that are different. I mean, certainly black kids are still sitting together in the cafeteria. There's some things that are the same, but if you look at our society over the last 20 years, there's some things that have changed dramatically. One of those things has to do with just the demographics. I mentioned I was born in 1954. In 1954, the white population of the United States was 90%. Everybody else, blacks, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans, represented 10% of the population. Today, the Latinx population is about 18%, the black population is 13%, the Asian population 6%, multiracial population is growing fast. Multiracial babies represent about 10% of our population. So our nation is much more diverse than it was 50 years ago. And when we hear a politician like President Trump say, "Make America Great Again," a lot of people hear that as "Make America White Again." But too late, it's not happening. And so a lot of the dynamics, though, that we see in our society today, I think are a direct result of the anxiety in the still majority population, the white population, of feeling like, the world I know is changing rapidly, and the anxiety that comes from that.
With all those percentages, where do you put the white population now?
It's about 67%.
Well, that's the tipping point, isn't it?
It is the tipping point, yeah. And that's the whole population. If you look at children, if you look at, the school-age population, it's already 50% kids of color. Yeah.
Fascinating. All right, so look out. Okay. Chandra, they want to know, did you look at any other nonprofit organizations besides the Girl Scouts?
When I was looking at my first job?
Or
No.
here? Well, yeah.
No, I was going for Girl Scouts. That was it. I mean, I was on the board of Girls Inc. of Greater Atlanta, so I had a big heart for girls' causes, and so I went for that. And again, this was a 6-month journey, right? So it wasn't like I had this whole portfolio of options I was looking at. I was literally shifting my life from 22 years at Coke, but 5 years at corporate before that, so basically 27 years of working in corporate America. So I didn't have this huge portfolio of things. I was like, this is what fits. This is where I would feel most comfortable making this shift. And it so happened that the job I did get was also youth serving, so it worked out really well.
Okay, this is maybe a follow-up on corporate America. What in corporate America feels like you have to be very passive so as not to appear angry?
Say that again? I can't spell passive, but say that again.
She doesn't understand that. Yeah, they just don't, how do you avoid being characterized as an angry black woman?
It doesn't matter. If you're not doing what is expected, you're gonna get called an angry black woman. So that's why I just kind of laugh. I started in corporate America. I went straight from undergrad to business school. So I left business school. I was like 24 years old. So I went straight, into corporate America at 24. I worked for Clairol, which is part of the reason I cut my hair off. I couldn't afford to get my hair done in New York City, so I cut it off. But yeah, I went to Anheuser-Busch, then went to Clairol, then I went to Coca-Cola. And I was very much the only black person there, only black woman there, and the youngest person there, all three. And so I had zero credibility. It was just like, what are you doing here? There must be some new program that they're trying to, integrate. Like you talked about racism. It's like, well, you're just here as affirmative action. You don't really know what you're doing. You're only 24. And so I learned early on that if I didn't step up and sit, my father taught me this. When you walk in a meeting room, sit at the table as close to the front as possible. When you walk into a meeting room, sit in the front of the room. Sit by the phone, sit by the front. Do not automatically do the side. Go to the wall. And so I always did that. And when I was at Coke, I used to work at Coke, but I used to wear hats every day and really high heels. And people are, oh, you're so fashionable. I was like, no. This is about trying to take up more space than I naturally take up. I'm 5'4", and I needed to be like 5'7", and have a whole lot of space around me because people were just not listening to me and they weren't looking at me. So I literally, when I laugh about the passive, I was never passive. Never, because you'll get run over. So yeah, you can't control how people call you. If you speak well, you're articulate, and what a surprise. And if you push back, you're angry, and what a surprise. And I told my friends, I had a lot of male friends because I worked in the science area, and I said, to Noah, who looks like Ray Jarrett, I'm like, I look like you. In my mind, I look just like you. He goes, well, don't act like you, act if you look like me, because you will get arrested. So it's just like the brothers had a whole nother issue because they literally had to kind of back down because people were physically frightened of them in some of the situations that they faced when they were, especially with innovation, change management. People were literally afraid of big black men, and so they had to kind of dial it back. I did not, and I did not.
All right. This will be a question for all of you to tackle if you'd like. Why is it so hard for white people to talk about race?
I spend a lot of my time talking about that. So I want to just, this is a largely, though not entirely black audience, but I'm going to ask a question that I often ask of audiences, regardless of who's in them, and just to make a point, if I might. So I would like everybody to think about your earliest race-related memory. Think about your earliest race-related memory. And without knowing that I'm not going to ask you to tell it, just raise your hand if you've thought of something. Many people have their hands up. So now the question I want to ask is how old you were. 4, I see 5, 6, 7 maybe. 9, I heard somebody say 5, a lot of 5s. Raise your hand if you are somewhere between 5, 6, or 7 in this memory you've got. Most people, not everybody. Some people have earlier memories. I've got a memory as young as 3, which I'll tell maybe later. But the fact of the matter is a lot of people have an early race-related memory. And now the question I want to ask is what emotion, if any, is attached to it? Yeah, well, like what? Happy, what? Okay, so you have a happy memory, a friendship memory. Uh-huh. So you have that happy memory. Other words: confusion, anger, fear, sadness, mad, surprised, ignored, confused, awkward. Sometimes people say embarrassed, ashamed. There's a wide range of feelings. Sometimes people will say happy, sometimes people will say love, but a lot of times it's confusion, anger, fear, sadness, embarrassment, awkward, all the words we just heard. Now the question I want to ask is, I want you to raise your hand if you had a conversation with someone, a concerned adult, a parent or a teacher, concerned adult, about the experience at the time that it happened. Raise your hand if you did. Okay, we have a few hands up. Raise your hand if you did not. Many more people will say did not, and this is always true. Every audience, doesn't matter how many people or even the demographic makeup of the audience, most people will say they did not have a conversation. But if you think about 5 and 6-year-olds, a lot of you were at that stage, how many of you have experience with 5 and 6-year-olds? Your own children or somebody else's? You know, a lot of you do. 5 and 6-year-olds are pretty candid. You know, they don't filter much, right? They say what's on their minds. They are very, you know, chatty. They tell family secrets. They do all kinds of things. And so it's very interesting to reflect on the fact that we have an audience, like a lot of audiences, that says, yes, I had an experience when I was that age. Yes, it made me uncomfortable in some significant way. And no, I didn't talk to anybody about it. And that tells me that a lot of people, regardless of their own racial background, a lot of people learned at an early age, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. So fast forward to, you know, now you're 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, whatever your age is, you've had a lot of reinforcement for not talking about it. And then somebody like me will be doing a workshop or teaching a class and will say, we're going to have a conversation about this topic that for most of your life you've been told don't talk about. For a lot of people, that just causes knots in the stomach. You know, it just generates sweaty palms, anxiety, a lot of discomfort. And it's especially true for white people because many people of color have learned they have to talk about it in order to navigate the various situations they find themselves in. But if you're a white person living in a largely white environment, and 75% of white people in the United States have entirely white social networks. That might seem odd thinking about, you know, life in Atlanta, but there are a lot of people who are in mostly white neighborhoods, going to mostly white schools, and their friendship networks are largely white, and as a consequence, they don't have to have the conversations, they can avoid them. But when asked to have the conversation, the first response typically is panic. Panic. You know, it's like, I don't want to do that. Don't make me do it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? That's fascinating. And thank you for participating in this exercise. Here is a question for all three of the panelists. Who are three women who influenced your core values and or your professional careers?
I can. My mother and my grandmother influenced just about everything that I did. Because of music, I am Diana Ross was the epitome of beauty to me when I was growing up. She was classy, and she carried herself in such a way. Oh, she was too skinny. Well, I was a skinny girl back then, not too much now. I was the one who took the brush and had the brush in my hand, and then you took a towel and you put the towel. Yeah. Because, you know, we thought all of that was her hair. You know? Yeah. And we watched the Ed Sullivan show. Y'all don't know anything about Ed Sullivan. But we used to watch Ed Sullivan on Sundays. And boy, when she would come up, it was a dream come true. And then obviously Aretha Franklin. There's no one like her. So for me, it was people who were musicians, and then it was my own mother and grandmother.
My mom, again, she's been teaching and continues to teach. She's doing what she loves, and so I learned a lot from her. My paternal grandma, it was Aunt Sarah, but she was not passive at all. So she was, they called her Pocahontas because she's beautiful, high cheekbones, and she could chop firewood. And I just thought that was amazing. So she's the stubborn father's mother, if that's the pattern, you can see it. And then the third person's kind of odd. I had to really think about it. I had a boss at Coke named Pat Fiorello, and she would fall out of her chair. She could hear me say that she influenced my life. But she was one of those people that was had hugely high integrity, and didn't know how much crazy was going on in the corporate environment. She was there when all the layoffs were happening. She stayed her course, and then we got to a point where she was like, I can't lay off any more people. She just rolled. And she was a very senior person, and she became an artist. She took her thing for painting, and she took all her corporate experience, and now she's teaching art and selling art and doing art and helping artists. And I just thought that was so amazing that someone could just walk away from that voluntarily and just follow her heart. So she was very influential in my decision to do what I did when things happened.
For me, it would certainly be my mother, who was, very talented person in her own right, but she became a reading teacher. She was a reading teacher she had 4 children and earned 2 master's degrees after going to college and became a reading teacher. And one of the major gifts she gave to me, beyond, all the things that mothers do, is that she taught me how to read when I was very young. So I was reading at the age of 3. And that set me on a path of academic success. Obviously, I got to school as a first grader, already a very accomplished reader. I skipped 2nd grade. I was just, I had a lot of academic success, which, has led throughout my life. And so I give my mom points for having set me on that path. And the second person would be a woman whose name is Faye Boulware. And she was, I think, the only one that I remember, only black female professor at Wesleyan University when I was an undergraduate there. And she taught a course, she was a psychologist, and she taught a course on black psychology and introduced me to the work of people like William Cross, who wrote about racial identity, and Janet Helms. And that work really shaped my interest as a psychologist. And she was a real mentor to me while I was a student at Wesleyan. And the first, outside of my parents, the first black teacher I ever had. So that was very meaningful. And then the third person was a woman whose name is Barbara Brown Zickman. Everybody called her BBZ. And it hasn't come up in the course of our conversation, but I also went to seminary later in my life. I was already a professor, and I decided to take classes at Hartford Seminary. And Barbara Brown Zickman was the president of the seminary, and she was also my advisor. And it was she who asked me, as I was working on my master's degree there, if I'd ever thought about being a college president, which at the time I had not. And she said, she told me something about being a college president. She said, a lot of people think you can just go out and find a college to be president of. It doesn't work that way. She said, usually colleges find you. Through the search process, you get nominated, people find you. She said, but you can't be president of just any college. It has to be a college you truly love. She said, because at the end of the day, it's a very demanding job, 24/7. And she knew this, of course, having been president of the seminary for 10 years. And she said, but at the end of the day, you will do a lot for your lover. And I thought, that was so profound. And when, as my career advanced, people started approaching me about being president of a college, I would always ask myself, is this an institution you could truly love? And so, of course, when the Spelman opportunity came, I knew the answer was yes.
This is so wonderful. I want to go on and on, but we're going to sort of close it down now, and I apologize to folks who did not get their question asked or answered. We're going to close out with this one. Is what advice do you have for young people to help overcome times when life has got you down?
The biggest thing I think I can say to a young person is to really try to operate in yourself and who you are, and understanding that you are enough, and that there is someone greater than yourself that has already ordained before the world was formed that you are great, you are wonderful, and that you are created for something that only you are created for. And that even when tough times come, you have to understand that you have to hold close to who you are. And our self-worth is taken away, and may have been taken away through the racial issue, or through teasing or bullying, or just life itself. But I know for me, in this quest of always trying to find my wholeness of who I am, I try to stay true to who I am. And the moment I stopped worrying about what others thought about me, and the opinion of others, and truly just did what I believe God was speaking to my soul to do, it always turned out right for me when that happened. And then my grandmother used to always help me with this. There is honor in long suffering. And she would say when I would fuss, why did this have to happen? Why is this going on? It's not fair. And she's saying, you're going upstream in life. But if you could turn that thing around and go downstream and understand that there's good days and there's bad days and trouble will come to everyone. So now when it comes, it's a part of who I am. And it's a part of the course. And I'm always looking for the lesson. And then another thing, we're so ego-driven in believing that the universe revolves around us. This is temporary. Most things are temporary. Whatever you're going through, even if you didn't fight your way through it, if you just held on long enough, it's going to pass. That comes with time, though. But when you're young, it seems like the world is coming to an end. But for me, and I have to say this because I am a woman of God, and I would not be doing what I've been called to do if I don't say that. The wholeness that you ever want to find and search for is in God. It is the only peace that you will find. And although you may question God, and although you may not quite understand what's going on, if you can really believe that there is something far greater going on than what you see around you, and you are a major part of that, then that will keep you focused and it will keep you moving forward. Now, will you pass the basket? I just did my sermon.
I like that idea of passing the basket. Fundraising. My advice would be talk to an old person, and I say that in all sincerity. The last time I had the youth development program, there were eighth graders to 12th graders. And some of the things these little babies had gone through was ridiculous, just some of the hardship they had gone through. And they would come and talk to me. And I was so thrilled that they thought enough to talk to this 50-year-old woman who they don't know that well. And so I think there's value. We didn't get to be old because we were stupid, right? We got through some stuff. Oh, there's not a lot of old fools, right? So if you have a question or something's bothering you, ask someone older than you. Significantly older is better. And someone who doesn't look like you is even better because they might have an even different perspective than you, just beyond just time and experience. The young man who said he had a positive race experience because he met someone that was marginalized, was a totally different reason, but most marginalized. It's like you never know what commonalities you'll find, the less like you the person you're talking to is. So that would be my advice, is take it to an old person. And I count as an old person. I own it.
Well, I'm about to have a birthday, and let me just say I'm not 50, so I'm really an old person. But here's the thing. When you ask the question, the first thought that came to mind is something that Judge Brown has already touched on, and that is, this too will pass, right? And I tell myself that a lot. When I was serving as president and tough things would happen, I would say, this too is gonna pass, and it does. But there's something else. For a long time, I had this quote on my bulletin board, and I would look at it a lot, and it says, look at your goals, look at your behavior. Does your behavior match your goal? And I mean, it's and there would be times when I would say, okay, here's my goal, but my behavior doesn't match up with what this goal is. So either I have to change the goal or change the behavior. And that has been very helpful to me throughout my life.
And I want to give you this little saying that my grandmother used to tell me. It costs what it costs, and it never goes on sale. Now, you already know what that means. There is a cost for everything. And for some people, you may think it's on sale and they got it easier. But they didn't, whether it's Oprah Winfrey or Tyler Perry or whomever it is. Because unless you walk a mile in someone's shoes, trust me, we gave you the edited version of what has happened. If I could tell you the stories, and every one of you have one, So when something is going on, I'll always do this cost-benefit analysis. And I'll say, okay, I want this wonderful thing to happen in my life, but what is it going to cost me? Or if I'm having health challenges, I've been dealing with issues with my legs. So I know that I'm going to have to, it's going to be a cost to it. It's either going to be some pain, I'm going to have to exercise, I'm going to have to do something. So I think we're living in a society where we want everything so easy because it appears to be easy, because we're so dealing with imaging now and branding. And we want everybody to think we have it all together when it costs something. So just remember, it costs what it costs, and what? And it doesn't go on sale. There you go.
All right, before we close out, I want to tell Winnie to tell us what's going on at Southview. This is a point of personal privilege. I'm the immediate past chair of the board of the Southview Historic Preservation Foundation. And that is an organization that supports the 131 or 2-year history of Southview Cemetery, where some very prominent Atlantans are buried. And it was a cemetery started by 5 formerly enslaved black men as a place to give dignity in death to black people who didn't always have it in life, certainly back not in 1886. So Winnie has something about a women's program they're going to do. And Judge Penny is going to make an invitation.
And I want to invite you to my conference. I have a conference. It's free of charge for women, so guys can't come. It's called, because I forgot to tell you all, I'm also CEO of a company, and I also own a makeup line. I mean, I got a lot of things going on. But I'm also the CEO of the JP Foundation. And it's a foundation for the restoration of families, children, and the eradication of people who are in poverty. It's a big issue because I grew up in poverty. I didn't tell you all that. But on Saturday, November the 3rd, and it's Friday the 2nd and the 3rd, but the big conference is on the 3rd. You all are invited to come. You can go to judgepenny.com. And when I'm done, I'm going to go to my car and I'm going to get some flyers. And me and my ladies are going to pass them out to you all while you're leaving. It's free of charge. I want you to go online and register. What is Sister Talk? It's about stories. Alexis was honored. She was my first honoree. We did the Sister of Substance Award. This year we're honoring the Honorable Shirley Franklin, Justine Boyd, who is with UNCF, and a lady by the name of Lenora Lange. And she is a commander in the U.S. Navy and will be the first African-American woman to have a ship named after her. Yes, is that not cool? Yeah. Now, she doesn't get it named after her until she passes. So we don't want her to pass. But in the line, because they do a line of it, I became acquainted with her through going to Harvard. And her mentee, who was a naval officer, introduced me. And so we're bringing her in from San Diego. But I'll be speaking there and preaching there. And there'll be other people. And it's about the stories. It's about leadership. It's about having spirituality be a part of leadership and professionalism. So I want to invite you all. And we'll have flyers afterwards. We'll grab that way.
Okay. And one more thing. We were talking earlier about Dr. Tatum. She is going to be honored by the National Council of Negro Women in November. Along with Eric Holder.
Yes. And that is November the 10th in Washington, D.C.
Chandra, you want to make any announcements about True Colors?
Yes, could it close it out now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it is. Well, we want to thank all of you so much for being a part of this event. This is called a community conversation. We talk about topics that are related to the productions that we have going on. So you heard the ladies in the front. 4 Women is our next production. Our first preview is on September the 25th at 7:30 right here on this stage. And then we open on the 28th of September, which is a Friday, and the show runs until October 21st. We are selling tickets outside. The first week is sold out. The second week is almost sold out. So we really want you to experience this. One of the joys of this job is getting a chance to see the creative process, and Michelle Shea is nothing short of a genius. She's our director, so I hope you will not miss this opportunity to come back and join True Colors for not only Nina Simone, but for the rest of the season. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Penny. I want to recognize the staff of True Colors, the staff members that are in the house. They're probably outside working, but we have Letitia, our development director, Jamil, Jude, our associate artistic director. We have our director of education, Nikki Toombs, and we have other staff members out there. They make this happen, so make sure you have a chance to say hello and thank them for their hard work.
Thank you. One more thing. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Letitia Ellerson, the Development Director at True Colors. Thank you once again for being here. And we had our wonderful Emory volunteers that are here that were helping us during the Q&A portion. And they will be outside handing you some postcards about Nina Simone. And there's a discount code on there as well, too. So if you're not able to purchase your tickets today, as a thank you for joining us, that you have a promotional discount code just for joining us for this day, okay? So thank you so much. If everyone could also mingle out in the lobby as well, too, as we exit the theater. And if you have any additional questions that we weren't able to get to today, we apologize about that. Our panelists will also be out in the lobby. Thank you so much.